Some doors don't creak when you open them, Evelyn Carter whispered, gripping the old photograph like it could slip through her fingers and vanish. They just changed the air in the room. She stood on a quiet street she'd never driven down before, the kind with tidy lawns and mailboxes shaped like little barns, the late afternoon sun turning everything honey-colored. The address on the curb was clear, the numbers painted fresh, like someone cared about being found. Evelyn's heart didn't race the way it did when she was young. It moved differently now, steady, heavy, certain. 68 years old, and she had never felt more like a stranger in her own life. The photo trembled once, then settled. It was small, the edges softened from time, the paper warm from her palm. A man's smile was frozen in it, familiar in a way that didn't make sense, standing beside a woman who looked like Evelyn, only younger, bright-eyed, hair pinned back as if she'd been in a hurry to become someone's before. Behind them, a sign angled toward the camera. Harbor Point, 1978, painted in cheerful letters. Evelyn hadn't been to Harbor Point in decades. She hadn't even said the name out loud. The strangest part wasn't the place or the year. It was the detail that kept pulling her back like a magnet. The man's left hand, lifted mid-laugh, showing a ring she recognized from her own jewelry box. Yet it wasn't on Richard's hand in the photo. It was on someone else's. Her throat tightened at the memory of finding it. 3 days earlier, she'd been in her attic with a dust mask and a stubborn sense of duty, determined to do what she'd put off for years. Richard had gone to the hardware store. Laura had texted she'd be late for Sunday dinner, and the house had that rare hush that made every floorboard sound like a confession. Evelyn had climbed the pull-down ladder and stepped into heat that smelled like cardboard and old cedar. Boxes towered in uneven stacks, each one labeled in her handwriting. Christmas, kitchen, Laura's school, Richard's files. She'd laughed at that last one, because when a man lives long enough, he starts turning his life into folders. She'd reached for a shoebox wedged behind a broken suitcase, the kind she thought held nothing but worn-out ornaments, and it had slid out too easily, as if someone had placed it there recently. Inside were photo albums she didn't remember making. The plastic sleeves were yellowed, the captions neat, the dates precise. Evelyn flipped through them and felt a faint dizziness, like walking into a room where people had been talking about you and suddenly stopped. Then, behind a framed picture she'd kept for years, a family portrait from Laura's graduation, she found the photograph. It wasn't in an album. It wasn't labeled. It was hidden, pressed flat, waiting. On the back, written in blue ink that had faded to gray, were 4 words that made Evelyn's stomach go cold. You deserve the truth. The handwriting wasn't hers. It wasn't Richard's. And beneath the words, in a smaller, sharper script, was a name she had never seen in her life. Yet somehow, in her bones, she knew she should have. Thomas Hale. Evelyn stood outside the unfamiliar house, her hand hovering just inches from the door, unable to knock as doubt and memory pressed heavily against her chest. The photograph in her hand refused to align with the life she had believed in for nearly 5 decades. It showed a younger version of herself beside a man named Thomas Hale, wearing a ring that looked exactly like the one her husband kept hidden away. That single detail unsettled her deeply, but it was only the beginning. There were too many small gaps in her memory, things she had dismissed for years as normal, now rising back with quiet insistence. 3 days earlier, everything had started in the attic, where she found a shoebox filled with albums she did not remember creating. Hidden behind a familiar family photo was the image that changed everything, along with a message written on the back telling her she deserved the truth. The tone of the message was not angry, but tired, as if it had waited patiently for years to finally be seen. The name Thomas Hale beneath it felt unfamiliar, yet carried a strange weight, like something important she had lost without realizing it. As she studied the photograph, more details began to pull her deeper into confusion. The location, Harbor Point, stirred fragments of memory, the scent of salt air, the sound of laughter, a summer that once felt alive. Yet the person connected to those memories remained just out of reach. Determined to understand, she searched the place and realized it was only a short drive away, a place she could have returned to at any time but never did. That realization alone felt wrong, as if part of her past had been quietly erased. The more she examined the image, the more inconsistencies appeared. A storefront name hinted at a connection to Thomas, and the date printed on the photograph matched her wedding anniversary with Richard. What once seemed like a simple coincidence now felt deliberate, almost planned. When Richard returned home that day, everything about him seemed normal on the surface, calm, familiar, predictable. Yet Evelyn could no longer ignore the growing sense that beneath that normalcy was something carefully hidden. That night, driven by the need for answers, she opened the ring box he kept and discovered the initials inside did not match his story. The truth was no longer just suspicion. It was forming into something undeniable. Finally, she found a sealed envelope addressed to her in the same handwriting as the message on the photograph, proof that the truth had always existed, just out of reach, waiting for the moment she was ready to see it. Now, standing in front of the house tied to that name, Evelyn understood that this was not just about a photograph or a forgotten memory. It was about a life that might have been shaped without her knowing, and a past that was no longer willing to stay buried. Evelyn did not open the envelope right away. She held it in her hands for a long moment, feeling the weight of something that had been waiting far longer than she had known. Morning light filled the kitchen, soft and ordinary, but nothing inside her felt ordinary anymore. The house looked the same table, the same walls, the same quiet rhythm of a life she had trusted. But now, everything felt staged, like a set built carefully around a truth she had never been allowed to see. When she finally broke the seal, her fingers moved slowly, almost cautiously, as if rushing would somehow damage whatever was inside. The paper unfolded with a faint sound that seemed louder than it should have been. The handwriting matched the photograph exactly. That alone was enough to send a cold certainty through her. She began reading, and within the first few lines, the ground beneath her life shifted. The letter did not explain everything, but it made one thing painfully clear. There had been more to her past than she remembered, and someone had made sure she never saw it. It spoke of messages that were never delivered, of attempts to reach her that disappeared before they ever had a chance. It spoke of decisions made not by her, but around her. And most unsettling of all, it spoke in a tone that suggested this had not been done out of cruelty, but out of something far more dangerous, certainty. Someone had believed they were doing the right thing. Evelyn lowered the letter slightly, her breath shallow, her mind racing to connect pieces that refused to fit together. The name at the bottom stopped her completely. Nora Whitman, her closest friend from those years. The one person she had trusted without question. Evelyn stared at the signature as if it might change if she looked long enough. Nora had written this. Nora had known. Without thinking further, Evelyn reached for her phone and called her. The line rang longer than usual, each second stretching her patience thinner, until finally Nora answered. Her voice sounded smaller than Evelyn remembered, as if time had quietly worn it down. Evelyn did not ease into the conversation. She went straight to the point. She told Nora about the letter. Silence followed, not confusion, not denial, but the kind of silence that confirms everything before a word is spoken. When Nora finally spoke, it was not to defend herself, but to admit what Evelyn had already begun to understand. There had been a time, decades ago, when things were different, when Evelyn's life had been moving in a direction that others believed was dangerous. Choices were made. Conversations happened behind her back, and slowly, carefully, her path was redirected without her ever realizing it. Evelyn's grip tightened around the phone as she asked the one question that now mattered more than anything. Who was Thomas Hale? Nora hesitated, and in that hesitation, Evelyn felt the truth pressing forward. When the answer came, it was simple, but it carried the weight of everything that had been hidden. He was not just someone from her past. He was someone she had chosen. Someone she had been meant to build a life with before that choice was taken from her. The room seemed to narrow as Evelyn absorbed it. This was not just a missing memory. This was a missing life. She asked if he was still alive. Nora's answer came quietly, but without doubt. Yes. And then, after a long pause, Nora gave her something else. An address. She told Evelyn that if she truly wanted the truth, she would have to see it for herself. After the call ended, Evelyn stood in the kitchen for a long time, the letter still in her hand, the world around her unchanged but no longer believable. She looked down at the photograph again, at the man beside her younger self, and for the first time, she did not see a stranger. She saw a question that had been waiting decades to be answered. And without fully allowing herself to think about what it might mean, Evelyn made a decision. She would go to Harbor Point. She would find Thomas Hale. And she would finally uncover the part of her life that had been taken before she even knew it existed. Evelyn did not drive to the address right away. After Nora gave it to her, she sat at the kitchen table and stared at the numbers she had written, as if they might rearrange themselves into something less real. Outside, a lawn sprinkler clicked on and swept water in a slow arc, steady and predictable, like a life that never asked difficult questions. Evelyn's life had been full of predictable things: grocery lists, school drop-offs, anniversaries, holidays planned 6 months ahead. She had trusted routines the way some people trusted religion. But now her routine felt like a script someone else had handed her, and she could not remember agreeing to the role. She folded Nora's letter and tucked it back into the envelope, then slid both into her purse beside the photograph. Her hands moved carefully, not from gentleness, but from a need to keep the pieces together until she understood what they formed. When Richard came back from his walk, he looked flushed from the cool air, cheerful in the way he always was when he believed problems could be solved by organizing a garage or repainting a fence. "Smells like coffee," he said, leaning to kiss her cheek. Evelyn turned her face slightly, so his lips brushed the edge of her skin instead of landing fully. It was a small motion, but she felt it echo through her body like a bell. Richard paused for half a beat, then pretended he did not notice. "I might run to the bank later," Evelyn said, testing the lie like a new pair of shoes. Richard nodded, too quickly. "Sure," he said. "Do what you need." The ease of his agreement made Evelyn's stomach sink. For years, she would have called it supportive. Now it felt like permission granted by someone who already knew where she was going. That afternoon, Evelyn drove alone, her hands at 10 and 2 like her father taught her, the radio off, the world outside the windshield too bright, too normal. The highway signs blurred past. Exits for shopping centers, exits for lakes, exits for towns with names she had never needed to learn. 90 miles was not far, not in America, not in a country built on the idea that you could reinvent yourself by driving long enough. Still, Evelyn felt every mile as if she was walking it in heavy boots. The closer she got, the more her mind tried to protect her by offering distractions. What to cook for dinner, whether she had paid the electric bill, whether Laura would visit next weekend. She let those thoughts pass like cars she did not need to chase. Underneath them, another set of thoughts pressed forward, older, sharper, hungry for air. In the last hour of the drive, memories began appearing the way they sometimes did in dreams, out of order but full of feeling. Harbor Point, the boardwalk, the smell of salt and fried dough, a cheap motel sign flickering at night, Evelyn's younger voice laughing so hard it surprised her. She remembered being 20, then 21, then 22, her life not yet narrowed into the channels of responsibility. Back then, she had worked at a department store cosmetics counter in a mall, standing all day in low heels, smiling at strangers, saving tips in a jar labeled beach. She had planned to go to school again, maybe for nursing, maybe for teaching. She told everyone she was still deciding, but the truth was she had been waiting for something she could not name to choose her. She met Thomas Hale at a county fair outside Harbor Point, on a July evening thick with humidity and music. He was not flashy. He was steady, with sun-browned arms and an easy grin that made people step closer. Without realizing it, he ran a small booth for his uncle's bait shop, tossing rings over bottles for kids who begged their parents for one more turn. Evelyn had approached with Nora, both of them pretending they were too grown for games. Thomas watched Evelyn miss twice, then slid a ring into her palm and said, "You throw like you are afraid to win." Evelyn had looked up, offended, and he had smiled as if he knew she would. She tried again and landed the ring perfectly. Thomas handed her a small stuffed bear and said, "See, you just needed to believe you deserved it." That sentence, so simple, had followed Evelyn for weeks. He asked her to walk the boardwalk with him after the fair closed, and she said yes before she had time to worry about what her mother would think. They talked about nothing that sounded important at the time. Favorite songs, the worst jobs they had worked, the best diner for pancakes. But there was an ease between them that Evelyn had never felt with boys from her hometown, boys who spoke like they already owned the future. Thomas spoke like the future was something you built with your hands, one honest day at a time. For a summer, Harbor Point became Evelyn's secret place. She would tell her parents she was working extra hours. Then she would take her tips and drive 90 miles with Nora in the passenger seat, the windows down, their hair whipping like they were in a movie. Some days Nora would wander off to meet her own friends, leaving Evelyn and Thomas to sit on the sand and talk while the sun dropped low. There was no scandal in it, no story to whisper, just two young people learning each other's shape in the world. Evelyn remembered Thomas showing her a ring one night, turning it between his fingers. "My father wore this," he said. "He said it was a reminder that if you love something, you hold it steady, you do not squeeze." Evelyn had laughed and said she would never be the squeezing type. Thomas had looked at her like he did not entirely believe her, then slipped the ring onto her finger for a moment, just to see. It was too big, sliding down to her knuckle. Evelyn had pulled it off and handed it back, smiling. She remembered Nora watching them from a few feet away, her expression unreadable in the dark. And then Evelyn remembered the phone call that came near the end of that summer, the one that changed the tone of everything. She could not remember the words spoken on the line, only the way Nora's face went pale afterward and the way Thomas stopped showing up like someone had turned off a light. Evelyn came out of the memory like waking from a nap you never meant to take, blinking as the highway bent and the exit sign for Cedar Ridge appeared ahead. The name meant nothing to her, yet her hands tightened on the steering wheel as if her body recognized it anyway. She signaled and took the ramp, her car humming over the seams in the pavement, the miles on the dashboard clicking upward with a calm that felt almost insulting. The further she got from home, the clearer one thing became. She did not just want answers about Thomas Hale. She wanted to know who had decided her life could be rearranged without her consent. She turned onto a two-lane road lined with maple trees, then into a neighborhood where the houses looked cared for but not showy, where people waved at each other and probably borrowed sugar without keeping score. The address Nora gave her was only a few blocks in, and when Evelyn saw the number on the curb, her stomach clenched with the same sensation she used to get before big tests in school. She slowed, passed the house once, then circled the block like someone casing her own courage. On the second pass, she pulled to the curb across the street, killed the engine, and sat with both hands in her lap, palms pressed together hard enough to ache. She expected her thoughts to be loud, but they were oddly quiet, as if her mind was holding its breath. The photograph felt heavy in her purse, like a small stone she had been carrying for years without noticing. She reached for it anyway, slid it out, and stared at Thomas's face until the details sharpened. He had kind eyes, laugh lines, a look that suggested he did not take himself too seriously. In the photo, Evelyn's younger self stood close to him, and something about that closeness made present-day Evelyn feel a sudden, fierce tenderness. For the girl she used to be, that girl had not been foolish. She had been trusting. She had believed people around her would not cut pieces out of her story and call it protection. Evelyn lowered the photo and looked at the house again. Curtains drawn on the front window, a porch swing, a small pot of flowers near the steps. Nothing dramatic, nothing that looked like it had been waiting for her. She told herself to step out, to cross the street, to knock, to hear the truth from the one person who could not hide it behind decades of marriage. Then her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Laura's name. Evelyn stared for a moment before answering, as if the sound of her daughter's voice might tip the balance one way or another. "Hi, sweetheart," Evelyn said, keeping her voice gentle. "Mom, are you okay?" Laura asked. "You sound different." Evelyn glanced toward the house and then toward the quiet street, the way you do when you are about to admit something that changes the room forever. "I am fine," Evelyn said, and realized it was not true. I am driving." "Where are you driving?" Laura pressed, and Evelyn heard the small edge of worry that had not been there when Laura was a teenager and assumed her parents were indestructible. Evelyn could have lied. She could have said she was going to the bank, the store, anywhere ordinary. But her throat tightened around the old habit of hiding. "I am looking for something," Evelyn said. "Something from a long time ago." Laura went quiet, then spoke more softly. "Is this about Dad? Did you two argue?" Evelyn swallowed. "It is complicated," she said, "and I do not want you stuck in the middle." "Mom, I am already in the middle," Laura replied, and there was a tired honesty in her voice that made Evelyn's eyes sting. "He was weird this morning. He asked if you were home. He asked me if you called Nora. When I asked why, he said it was nothing, But he does not say nothing like that unless it is something. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. Richard knew about Nora. Richard had asked about Nora, which meant the file in Richard's head was open, the old tab never fully closed. Evelyn's phone buzzed again, a second call coming in, and her chest tightened when she saw the name, Richard Carter. For a second, she did not answer. She imagined him at home, standing in the kitchen where she had once felt safe, holding the velvet box, holding the past with steady hands. The phone kept ringing. Laura's voice came through, urgent. "Mom, answer him," she said. "If you do not, he is going to get in the car." Evelyn's grip on the phone turned firm, almost numb. She ended the call with Laura and answered Richard. "Hi," she said. Richard did not start with hello. "Where are you?" he asked, and his voice was calm, too calm, like a man trying to keep a lid on boiling water. Evelyn stared at the neat porch across the street. "Out," she said, "running an errand." There was a pause, and in that pause Evelyn heard something she had never heard from Richard before, fear. Not fear of losing his marriage. Fear of being exposed. "Evelyn," Richard said, choosing her name carefully, "I need you to come home." Evelyn's heartbeat thudded once, heavy and deliberate. "Why?" she asked. Richard hesitated, then said a sentence that made Evelyn's hands go cold. "Because you are not the only one who remembers Harbor Point." Evelyn felt the world narrow to the sound of Richard's breathing on the line, steady but strained, like a man holding himself upright with pure will. "What did you just say?" she asked, and the question came out quieter than she expected. Across the street, the porch swing moved slightly in the breeze, empty, patient. "Evelyn," Richard repeated, "I need you to come home." She looked at the house again, at the clean steps and the small pot of flowers, and something inside her clicked into place. For years, she had been the one who came home when asked, the one who smoothed things over, the one who accepted uncomfortable silences as the price of peace. "No," she said, "not until you tell me the truth." Richard exhaled, and she could picture him standing in their kitchen, one hand on the counter like he might tip over if he let go. "You do not understand," he said. "If you are where I think you are about to reopen something that was closed for a reason." Evelyn's grip tightened around the phone. "A reason for who?" she asked. "For me? Or for you?" There was a pause. Then Richard said, "For all of us." Evelyn heard a car pass behind her, tires rolling over the street with casual indifference. She lowered the window slightly, letting in cool air that smelled like cut grass and distant barbecue, and she realized how absurd it was that the world kept smelling normal while her life cracked open. "I found the photograph," she said. "I found Nora's letter. I saw the initials inside the ring. Thomas Hale is not a rumor, Richard. He is a person, and you have been carrying him around our marriage like a secret you never stopped managing." Richard did not deny it. That was the second thing that shattered. "Where did you get the ring?" Evelyn asked. "Do not ask me that," Richard said, voice tightening. "Ask yourself why you never asked sooner." The deflection was familiar, the old Richard, the one who could turn a conversation with one sentence. But Evelyn was not the same woman who used to accept that. "I am asking now," she said. "Tell me why Harbor Point is my anniversary. Tell me why my memories feel edited. Tell me why my best friend signed a letter saying I deserve the truth." Richard's voice dropped, and in it Evelyn heard something she had mistaken for strength for decades. Control. "Because you were going to throw your life away," he said. "You were 22, impulsive, and you thought that summer feeling would last forever." Evelyn stared at Thomas's house, her throat tight. "Do not talk about my life like it belonged to you," she said. Richard swallowed audibly. "It did not belong to me," he said. "But it was about to belong to nobody. You do not know what was happening behind the scenes." Evelyn laughed once, bitter and sharp. "Then explain it," she said. Another pause. Then Richard spoke, and each word sounded like it cost him something. "I knew Thomas," he admitted. "Before you did." Evelyn's heart thudded heavy. "That is impossible," she whispered, but it was not a denial. It was her mind trying to refuse a new shape of reality. "It is not," Richard said. "My uncle had the hardware store in Harbor Point back then. I spent summers there. I knew the Hale family. I knew what Thomas was like when nobody was watching." Evelyn's fingers went cold. "What are you implying?" she asked. Richard's voice softened, but it did not comfort. "I am implying that he was not the safe choice you think he was," Richard said. "And I am implying that your parents were terrified." Evelyn's stomach turned. Her parents. Her father who believed reputation was everything. Her mother who believed love was dangerous unless it came with stability. They called you, Evelyn said, the thought forming like a bruise. Richard did not answer immediately, which was answer enough. Your mother called Nora, Richard finally said. Nora called me. They were all panicking. You were sneaking off every weekend. People were talking. And then there was more. Evelyn's voice came out as a rasp. More what? Richard's silence stretched. Evelyn felt the dread rise, not as a sudden shock, but as a slow, unstoppable tide. Evelyn, Richard said, you were going to leave. Not just Harbor Point. You were going to leave your entire life behind. Evelyn's mind flashed to the boardwalk, to Thomas's laugh, to the ring sliding down her knuckle. She had been young. She had been brave. She had been ready to choose her own future. So you stopped me, she said. You and Nora and my parents decided you knew better. Richard's tone sharpened. We were trying to save you, he insisted. You think love is enough, but love does not pay bills. Love does not protect you from mistakes that follow you for decades. Evelyn's hands shook. You mean like the mistake of lying to me for decades? She said. Richard's breath hitched, and then his voice lowered to something almost raw. I did not start it, he said, but I finished it. Evelyn closed her eyes. Tell me what you did, she said. Richard's confession came out in pieces, like someone pulling splinters from skin. He said he drove to the bait shop after Nora called. He said he confronted Thomas, told him Evelyn's parents were ready to make this ugly if he kept seeing her. He said Thomas tried to explain, tried to write, tried to reach her. Richard said the letters started coming, and because Nora worked part-time at the post office then, she saw the envelopes before they were delivered. Richard said he convinced Nora to hold them. You stole my mail, Evelyn whispered, and it did not sound like an accusation. It sounded like disbelief. We held them, Richard corrected, as if the softer word could soften the act. Evelyn opened her eyes and looked at the house again. And the phone call? She asked. Richard's voice cracked. I made it, he admitted. I called him and told him you were engaged. Evelyn's body went still. Engaged to who? She asked, though she already knew. To me, Richard said. That was the plan. Your parents wanted certainty. They wanted you settled before you changed your mind again. Evelyn felt like she could not get enough air. I never agreed to that, she said. Not then. Not then, Richard echoed, and there was regret in his voice, but it was wrapped in something else, something selfish. But you did later. You chose me. Evelyn's laugh came out broken. I chose you after you removed my other choice, she said. That is not choosing. That is being guided like a child. Richard's voice rose, desperate now. I loved you, he said. I have loved you every day. I built a life with you. I raised Laura with you. The mention of Laura hit Evelyn like a bell. Why did you say I am not the only one who remembers Harbor Point? She asked. Richard hesitated, and Evelyn felt the answer forming before he spoke it. Because Laura has a right to know, Richard said quietly. And because if you knock on that door, you might learn the one truth I have been trying to protect her from. Evelyn's throat tightened. Protect her from what? She asked. Richard's voice dropped to a whisper. From the fact that she might not be mine, he said. Evelyn's entire body went cold, and in the silence that followed, the wind chime on Thomas Hale's porch clicked 3 hollow notes, as if the house itself had been listening. Evelyn kept the phone to her ear for a second longer, not because she needed to hear Richard again, but because she needed to feel the weight of what he had said settle into something solid. The words might not be mine hung in the air like smoke, and suddenly every ordinary detail in her life looked suspicious. The family photos on the refrigerator, the height marks on the pantry door frame, the way Richard always insisted Laura had his smile. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she refused to let panic drive. Panic was what? Other people used to steer her. You do not get to use Laura as a lock on my life, Evelyn said, voice low and steady. Richard's breath hitched on the other end. Evelyn, please, he started, but she cut him off. I am done with please, she said. I am done with plans you make with other people and hand me later like a gift. She ended the call before he could find a softer sentence to wrap the same control inside. Her hand stayed on the phone for a moment, then lowered it into her lap. Silence filled the car, thick and complete. Across the street, the house did not react. It just existed. Evelyn stared at the porch steps and thought about all the years she had spent being polite, being grateful, being the kind of woman who kept family secrets because that was what good wives did. Her mind tried to leap ahead, to imagine DNA tests and lawyers and holiday tables split in half. She pulled it back. One step, one truth at a time. She took the photograph out again and looked at her younger face, the girl who believed she deserved to win, the girl Thomas teased at the fair. Evelyn whispered, almost to that girl, "I am sorry it took me this long." Then she opened the car door and stepped out. The air felt cooler than it had inside the car, and the ground under her shoes felt strangely firm, like it was holding her up on purpose. She crossed the street slowly, not because she was afraid of being seen, but because she wanted to arrive as herself, not as a rush of adrenaline. When she reached the base of the steps, she stopped. She could see the paint strokes on the railing, fresh, careful. Someone here repaired things instead of abandoning them. That detail softened something inside her, and she hated that it did, because she did not come for comfort. She came for truth. She lifted her hand and knocked once, then again, each knock measured, unmistakable. The wind chime clicked 3 notes. Evelyn waited. No footsteps, no voice. She knocked again, a little louder, and then she heard movement, not hurried, not startled, just the sound of someone standing up from a chair they had been sitting in for a long time. The door opened a few inches, held by a chain. A man's face appeared in the gap, older than the photograph, but undeniably the same eyes. Gray hair, neatly cut, a simple collared shirt. The kind of face that had been weathered by work and seasons, not by drama. He looked at Evelyn like he was seeing a ghost he had trained himself not to expect. His mouth opened, then closed. Evelyn realized her own lips were trembling. She did not want them to. She wanted control, but her body was ahead of her pride. "Thomas Hale?" she asked, though she knew. The man swallowed, eyes flicking to her hands. "Yes," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried a tired edge, like someone who had practiced being calm in the face of disappointment. Evelyn's chest tightened so much she had to inhale slowly. "My name is Evelyn Carter," she said. She hated her last name in that moment. It felt borrowed. Thomas's eyes widened, and for a second the calm cracked. "Evelyn," he said, barely louder than the wind chime. The way he spoke her first name did something to her, something that reached through decades and touched a place that had been waiting. Thomas's gaze dropped to the photograph she held, and his face changed as if he had been struck by memory. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Evelyn let out a breath that sounded like a laugh, and a sob had tried to share the same space. "I found it," she said. "Hidden, like everything else." Thomas's jaw tightened, and Evelyn watched him make a decision behind his eyes. He reached up, unlatched the chain, and opened the door wider. The hallway behind him smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner. Normal. Again, the insult of normal. "Come in," he said quietly. Evelyn stood on the threshold and felt the weight of Richard's warning press against her back. "You might learn the one truth I have been trying to protect her from." Evelyn looked Thomas in the eyes and asked the question she had been avoiding since the ring box, since Nora's letter, since Richard's confession. "Did you try to reach me?" she asked. Thomas's expression hardened with something that looked like pain controlled into silence. "For years," he said. Evelyn's throat burned. "And Laura," she said, forcing the name out. "Did you ever know about her?" Thomas blinked, and when he spoke, his voice dropped to something almost reverent. "I did not just know," he said. "I have her picture." Evelyn's entire body went still. "What picture?" she whispered. Thomas turned his head toward a shelf in the living room, where a small frame sat angled away from the door. "The one they could not steal," he said. "The one that proves what Richard is afraid to say out loud. Tot. La nai toi viet cho ban dung chat kachian plus do 502 plus kyo mute sang part 9. Kong cat cut nu me ban you." Evelyn stepped fully into the room, but it did not feel like entering a stranger's house. It felt like stepping into a version of her life that had been quietly paused without her permission. Thomas moved slowly, not rushing her, not trying to fill the silence, as if he understood that this moment did not belong to words yet. Her eyes drifted to the small frame resting on the shelf, the one he had mentioned. He picked it up carefully and turned it toward her. The moment Evelyn saw it, something inside her chest tightened so suddenly she had to grip the edge of the table to stay steady. It was Laura. Younger, smiling, missing teeth, her hair uneven like Evelyn used to fix it before school. But it was not just the image that shook her. It was the realization that this moment, this memory, existed in a place she had never known. Thomas had not just remembered her. He had held on. He had kept proof of a life he was never allowed to be part of. Evelyn's voice came out quieter than she expected as she asked how he could have something like this. Thomas did not look away. He told her the truth had never been simple. He had been told she moved on, that she chose another life, that reaching out would only cause harm. But he had never fully believed it. Over the years, he had tried to find answers, collecting small pieces, fragments of information that confirmed one thing. The silence between them had not been her choice. Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, worn from time and handling. He placed it in front of her without opening it, giving her the same respect no one else had given her before, the choice to know. Evelyn hesitated for only a second before opening it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written across months, even years. She skimmed the first lines and felt her throat tighten. He had written to her again and again, asking why she disappeared, telling her where he would be waiting, hoping she would come. He had not stopped because he believed in her. Evelyn's hands trembled as she flipped through more pages, each one another piece of a life she never received. The truth settled slowly but heavily. Those letters had never reached her. They had been taken, withheld, erased from her path. She looked up at Thomas, and for the first time, she did not see a stranger from a photograph. She saw the missing half of a story she had never been allowed to finish. Before she could speak again, her phone buzzed sharply in her purse, pulling her back into the present. She took it out and saw Laura's name on the screen, followed by a message that made her breath catch. Her husband was on his way, and he was not coming calmly. Evelyn closed her eyes for a brief moment, not to escape, but to steady herself. When she opened them again, something had changed. She was no longer searching for the truth. She was ready to face it. Evelyn stared at Laura's message until the words felt like pressure pushing her back, but she did not move. Thomas remained silent, giving her space to decide. She placed the phone beside the letters and photograph, took a steady breath, and said quietly that Richard was coming. When Thomas asked if she wanted him sent away, she refused. She had been pushed aside long enough. Looking at Laura's childhood photo, Evelyn felt a deep, unwavering love that did not depend on truth or blood. No matter what, Laura was her daughter. She gathered the letters and photo into her purse, no longer willing to leave pieces of her life behind. Outside, a car door slammed, and moments later Richard arrived, tense and controlled, scanning the house as if trying to contain what was already unraveling. When he knocked, Evelyn answered without hesitation. He tried to stop her, insisting she did not understand, but she calmly pushed back, reminding him that he had spent decades making sure she never could. Richard claimed he was protecting their family, but Evelyn saw it clearly now. He had only protected his version of it. He tried to pull her back by mentioning Laura, but Evelyn stood firm, saying Laura deserved the truth. When Richard warned her not to destroy everything, she answered with clarity that truth does not destroy what is real, only what is built on lies. For the first time, she refused to yield to his control. She told him she would speak to Laura with honesty and respect, not anger. When Richard asked what would happen if Laura hated him, Evelyn did not soften. He would have to live with his choices. In that moment, the power between them shifted completely. Thomas stepped back, allowing Evelyn to stand on her own. She held up the photograph and told Richard that it changed everything not because of what it showed, but because of what he had hidden. Richard's strength faded, replaced by the weight of truth. Without hesitation, Evelyn turned away, walked down the steps, and moved toward her car. She did not know what would come next, but for the first time in decades, the direction of her life belonged entirely to her.